love is not always loud. We live in a world that celebrates big moments, grand declarations, dramatic gestures, and words spoken at the highest volume. We are taught to believe that love must be seen, must be heard, must be proven in ways that capture attention. But real love often doesn't work that way. Sometimes love is quiet. It's in the way someone remembers how you take your tea without ever asking again. It's in the silent presence of a person who sits beside you when you have no words left to say. It's in the patience of someone who listens not to reply, but to truly understand. These moments don't make noise. They don't demand applause. But they carry a depth that loud expressions often cannot reach. The truth is, loud love can be temporary. It can be driven by emotion, by impulse, by the need to be seen. But quiet love is intentional. It is steady. It is built on awareness, empathy, and care. Think about it. Who truly impacts your life? Is it the people who speak the most, or the ones who show up again and again without needing recognition? Love is not proven in a single moment. It is revealed over time, in consistency, in reliability, in the small, repeated acts that say, I'm here, I care, you matter. And here's something even more important. We often overlook these quiet acts because we are trained to look for something bigger. We miss the message because we are waiting for a louder signal. But if you shift your perspective, you begin to see it everywhere, in kindness, in patience, in the gentle ways people choose to stay, even when it's not easy. So today, I want to challenge you. Don't just look for loud love. Learn to recognize quiet love. And more than that, be that person. Be the one who shows up. Be the one who listens. Be the one who cares in ways that don't need attention, but create impact. Because in the end, it's not the loudest expressions that shape our lives. It's the quiet acts of care that stay with us the longest. We grow up surrounded by the idea that love must be visible, dramatic, and undeniable. We see it in movies, in stories, in the way people celebrate it through big words, grand gestures, and moments designed to be remembered. It's easy to believe that if love is real, it must be loud enough to be heard above everything else. But reality teaches a different lesson. The most meaningful forms of love often exist beneath the surface. They don't compete for attention. They don't try to prove themselves in obvious ways. Instead, they move quietly through everyday life, shaping experiences in ways that are easy to overlook if you are not paying attention. Love can be found in restraint, in choosing patience instead of reaction, in choosing understanding instead of judgment. It appears in the smallest decisions, like pausing before speaking, considering someone else's feelings, or offering support without being asked. These are not the kinds of moments that get noticed by a crowd, but they are the ones that build trust, safety, and connection over time. There is a difference between expression and intention. Expression is what we see. Intention is what we feel. Loud expressions of love can be powerful, but they are often temporary. They are tied to a moment, an emotion, or a need to communicate something quickly. Quiet love, on the other hand, is rooted in intention. It is not about being seen. It is about being present. It is not about proving something. It is about living it consistently. Consistency is where subtle love becomes powerful. A single grand gesture may create excitement, but it is the repeated, thoughtful actions that create stability. Checking in on someone regularly, remembering details that matter to them, offering help without being reminded. These actions may seem small on their own, but together they form a pattern that says, you are valued, you are not alone. And this pattern has an impact that goes far beyond what words can achieve. There is also a quiet strength in being present. Presence does not require perfection. It does not demand the right words or the perfect response. It simply requires attention. Being fully there with someone, even in silence, can communicate more than a long conversation ever could. In moments of difficulty, people rarely remember exactly what was said. What they remember is who stayed, who listened, who didn't turn away when things became uncomfortable or complicated. This is where subtle love reveals its depth. It does not rush to fix everything. It does not try to control outcomes. It allows space for growth, for healing, for understanding. And in that space, something meaningful begins to develop. Another aspect of subtle love is awareness. It requires noticing what others might miss. It requires sensitivity to the needs, emotions, and experiences of those around you. This kind of awareness is not automatic. It is developed through attention and intention. When you begin to pay closer attention, you start to see how often love is already present in your life. In the person who adjusts their schedule to make time for you. in the friend who remembers something you mentioned weeks ago, in the quiet support that shows up without being announced. These are not coincidences, they are choices. And recognizing these choices changes the way you understand connection. It shifts your focus away from what is missing and toward what is already there. It allows you to appreciate the depth of relationships, rather than measuring them by how visible or dramatic they appear. There is also a discipline involved in practicing this kind of love. It requires patience, especially in a world that values speed and immediacy. It requires effort, even when there is no recognition or reward. And it requires a level of emotional awareness that goes beyond reacting to situations and moves toward understanding them. This is not always easy. It is much simpler to express love in ways that are obvious and immediate. It is easier to say something than to consistently show it. It is easier to create a moment than to build a pattern. But patterns are what last. Subtle love is not about intensity, it is about continuity. It is not about standing out, it is about staying consistent. And over time, this consistency builds something that cannot be easily shaken. It builds trust. Trust does not come from a single action. It comes from repeated experiences that reinforce a sense of reliability and care. When someone knows they can depend on you not just once, but repeatedly, that is when a deeper connection begins to form. And this applies not only to how you give love, but also to how you receive it. Sometimes the challenge is not that love is absent, but that it is unrecognized. It does not match the expectations you have been taught to look for. It does not arrive in the form you imagined, and because of that, it can be dismissed or overlooked. But when you begin to understand that love is subtle, your perspective shifts. You start to value presence over performance, consistency over intensity, depth over display, and in doing so, you begin to experience relationships in a more grounded and meaningful way. You become more attentive, more patient, more aware of the impact of your actions, because you realize that even the smallest act of care has the potential to shape someone's experience in a significant way. A simple gesture, repeated over time, can create a lasting impression. A moment of patience can change the direction of a conversation. A quiet act of support can provide strength when it is needed most. These are not insignificant details. They are the foundation of something deeper. It's a simple idea, but it challenges one of the most common beliefs about love, success, and human connection, that what matters most is how powerful a moment feels. We are drawn to intensity. We remember the big gestures, the emotional highs, the moments that feel larger than life. They capture our attention, they create excitement, and they give us something to talk about. But intensity fades. No matter how strong a moment is, it is temporary by nature. It rises quickly, peaks, and then settles. And when it fades, what remains is not the memory of how powerful it felt, but the pattern of what follows. This is where consistency begins to matter more. Consistency is quieter. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't try to impress. Instead, it shows up repeatedly, in ways that may seem ordinary on the surface, but carry extraordinary weight over time. It is the decision to be present, again and again, even when there is no spotlight, no recognition, and no immediate reward. Think about trust for a moment. Trust is not built in a single day. It is not created through one intense action, no matter how meaningful that action may seem. Trust is built gradually, through repeated experiences that reinforce reliability. When someone knows that you will show up not just once, but consistently, they begin to feel secure. That sense of security cannot be created through intensity alone. Intensity can create a spark, but consistency sustains the flame. In relationships, this becomes even more clear. A grand gesture may create a strong emotional response, but it does not define the relationship. What defines the relationship is what happens in the days that follow. The small check-ins, the thoughtful actions, the willingness to listen, the effort to understand these are the elements that shape the foundation. Consistency is not about perfection. It does not require you to always get everything right. It does not demand flawless behavior or constant success. Instead, it requires commitment. It requires the willingness to keep showing up, even when things are difficult, even when energy is low, even when the outcome is uncertain. This is where many people struggle. It is easier to be intense for a short period of time than it is to be consistent over a long period. Intensity is driven by emotion, and emotion can be powerful but unpredictable. Consistency, on the other hand, is driven by intention. It is a choice that must be made repeatedly, often without the reinforcement of immediate results. But this is exactly what gives it strength. When actions are repeated over time, they begin to form patterns. And patterns create expectations. When someone experiences your consistency, they begin to rely on it. They begin to trust not just what you say, but what you do. And that trust becomes the foundation of a deeper connection. Consistency also creates clarity. When actions are consistent, there is less confusion. People do not have to guess what you mean or where you stand. Your behavior communicates it clearly. This reduces uncertainty and allows relationships to develop in a more stable and grounded way. Intensity, while powerful, can sometimes create the opposite effect. It can raise expectations quickly, but without consistency, those expectations cannot be sustained. This leads to disappointment, not because the initial action was not genuine, but because it was not supported by what followed. The contrast between intensity and inconsistency can feel even more significant than the absence of intensity altogether. This is why consistency is often more impactful. It creates alignment between intention and action. It ensures that what you express is supported by what you do over time. And it allows others to experience your presence in a way that feels reliable and steady. There is also a deeper psychological impact to consider. Human beings are naturally drawn to patterns. We look for predictability because it helps us feel safe. When something is consistent, it becomes easier to understand and trust. This applies not only to relationships, but to habits, goals, and personal growth. If you want to improve in any area of your life, intensity will not be enough. A single day of extreme effort cannot replace weeks or months of steady progress. The same principle applies to how you treat others. A single moment of kindness, no matter how powerful, cannot replace the impact of consistent care. Consistency transforms small actions into meaningful outcomes. It takes something simple and, through repetition, gives it significance. Over time, these small actions accumulate, creating a larger effect that would not be possible through isolated moments of intensity. This is why consistency requires patience. The results are not always immediate. They build gradually, often without noticeable change in the beginning. But with time, the impact becomes clear. What once seemed small begins to reveal its true value. And this is where perspective becomes important. If you are focused only on intensity, you may overlook the importance of what happens in between those big moments. You may underestimate the value of small, repeated actions because they do not stand out in the same way. But if you shift your focus to consistency, you begin to see those actions differently. You begin to understand that every small effort contributes to something larger. Every moment of showing up, every act of care, every decision to remain present adds to a pattern that defines who you are and how you connect with others. Consistency is not about doing something extraordinary once. It is about doing something meaningful, repeatedly. And in that repetition, something powerful begins to form. A sense of reliability, a sense of trust, a sense of stability that cannot be created through intensity alone. Because while intensity may capture attention, consistency earns belief. And belief is what allows something to last. When people believe in your actions, they no longer look for proof in every moment. They no longer question your intentions. Instead, they recognize the pattern you have created and respond to it with confidence. This is what makes consistency so impactful. It shifts the focus from what is said in a moment to what is demonstrated over time. It turns actions into evidence, and it allows relationships, goals, and personal growth to develop in a way that is steady and sustainable. It sounds simple, almost obvious, yet it is one of the most overlooked forces in human connection. In a world filled with constant movement, distraction, and noise, being fully present has become rare. People are often physically there, but mentally elsewhere, thinking about the next task, the next message, the next moment. And in that divided attention, something essential is lost. Because presence is not just about being there, it is about being with. To be present means to give someone your full attention, without interruption, without distraction, without the need to control or fix the moment. It is the ability to pause everything else and focus entirely on what is happening right now. That kind of attention carries a weight that words alone cannot replicate. When you are truly present, you create space. A space where the other person feels seen. A space where they feel heard. A space where they feel that for that moment they matter. This is more powerful than advice, more powerful than solutions, more powerful than trying to say the perfect thing. Because often people are not looking for answers. They are looking for understanding. They are looking for someone who will stay, who will listen, who will not rush them or redirect the conversation. And presence provides exactly that. There is a difference between listening and waiting to speak. Many conversations are not truly exchanges, they are pauses between responses. One person speaks while the other prepares what to say next. But when you are present, you are not thinking ahead. You are not formulating your reply while the other person is still talking. You are fully engaged in understanding what is being said, and even what is not being said. This level of attention changes the quality of interaction. It allows you to notice details that would otherwise go unnoticed: the tone of voice, the pauses, the emotions behind the words. It helps you respond in a way that is aligned with the moment, rather than reacting based on assumptions or distractions. Presence also requires stillness, not just physical stillness, but mental stillness. The ability to quiet the internal noise that constantly pulls your attention in different directions. This is not easy, especially in an environment designed to keep you engaged with multiple things at once. Notifications, responsibilities, and constant input make it difficult to focus on a single moment. But that is exactly why presence has become so valuable. When you choose to be present, you are choosing depth over distraction. You are choosing quality over quantity. You are choosing to invest your attention in a way that creates meaning, rather than spreading it thin across multiple things that leave little impact. There is also a sense of respect embedded in presence. When you give someone your full attention, you are communicating that they are important, not through words, but through behavior. You are showing that they are worth your time, your focus, and your energy. This kind of respect cannot be imitated through quick gestures or surface-level interactions. It is felt, and that feeling stays. Think about the moments in your life when you felt truly understood. It was likely not because someone said something extraordinary. It was because they were there with you, fully engaged, without distraction. They listened, they stayed. They allowed you to express yourself without interruption or judgment. Those moments create connection, not because of what was said, but because of how it was experienced. Presence also strengthens trust. When someone knows that you are genuinely there for them, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, they begin to rely on that. They begin to open up more, to share more, to engage more deeply. This builds a level of connection that cannot be achieved through inconsistent or distracted interaction. Trust grows in the space where presence exists, and that space must be created intentionally. It does not happen automatically. It requires a decision to put aside distractions, to focus attention, to remain engaged, even when it would be easier to withdraw. It requires discipline, especially when the moment is uncomfortable or emotionally demanding, because presence is not only important in easy moments, it becomes even more significant in difficult ones. When someone is struggling, the instinct is often to fix the situation, to offer advice, or to move the conversation toward a solution. But not every situation needs to be solved immediately. Sometimes, what is needed most is simply to be there, to share the weight of the moment without trying to change it. This kind of presence requires patience. It requires the ability to sit with uncertainty, to accept that you may not have the answers, and to still remain engaged. And in doing so, you provide something that is often more valuable than any solution: a sense of support that is steady and reliable. Presence also has an impact on how you experience your own life. When you are constantly distracted, moments pass without being fully experienced. Time moves quickly, but without depth. But when you are present, even ordinary moments begin to feel more meaningful. Conversations become more engaging. Experiences become more vivid. Interactions become more fulfilling. You begin to notice more. You become more aware of your surroundings, your thoughts, your emotions, and the people around you. This awareness creates a richer experience, not because anything external has changed, but because your attention has shifted. And attention shapes experience. Where you place your attention determines what you notice, what you remember, and what you value. When your attention is scattered, your experience becomes fragmented. But when your attention is focused, your experience becomes more complete. Presence brings that focus. It aligns your attention with the moment, allowing you to fully engage with what is happening instead of dividing your awareness across multiple directions. This alignment creates a sense of clarity that is difficult to achieve otherwise. It also influences how others respond to you. When you are present, people feel it. They recognize the difference, even if they cannot always explain it. It creates a sense of comfort, a sense of ease, a sense that the interaction is genuine rather than rushed or forced. And that changes the dynamic. Conversations become more open. Interactions become more meaningful. Connections become stronger. Because presence is not just about attention. It is about intention. It is the choice to be fully engaged in a moment, to give your focus without reservation, and to create an environment where connection can develop naturally. And when that choice is made consistently, it transforms the way relationships are experienced. It shifts the focus away from performance and toward authenticity. It replaces distraction with engagement. It's a phrase that is often repeated, but rarely explored in its full depth. Words are powerful. They can inspire, comfort, and connect. They allow us to express thoughts, intentions, and emotions in ways that can be understood quickly. But words, by their nature, are immediate. They exist in the moment they are spoken, and their impact depends heavily on what follows. Because without action, words begin to lose their weight. It is easy to say something meaningful. It is easy to promise, to reassure, to express care in a way that sounds convincing. In many situations, the right words can create a strong emotional response. They can make someone feel valued, understood, and supported. But that feeling is temporary if it is not supported by consistent behavior. This is where the difference begins to emerge. Words describe intention. Actions demonstrate commitment. And commitment is what people trust. When actions align with words, they reinforce each other. They create a sense of consistency that strengthens belief. But when there is a gap between what is said and what is done, that gap becomes noticeable. Over time, it creates doubt. Not because the words were meaningless, but because they were not supported in a way that made them reliable. Reliability is built through repetition. A single action can be powerful, just as a single statement can be meaningful. But it is the pattern that follows that defines the reality. When someone consistently acts in a way that reflects what they say, their behavior becomes predictable in the best possible way. It creates a sense of stability, a sense that their words are not just expressions, but reflections of who they are. This is why actions carry more depth. They require effort. They require time. They require follow-through. Words can be spoken instantly, but actions unfold over time. They demand attention, energy, and consistency. And because of that, they reveal something more significant than intention. They reveal priority. What you do consistently shows what matters to you. Not what you say matters, not what you plan to do, but what you actually follow through on. This is what people observe, consciously or unconsciously. They notice patterns. They notice effort. They notice whether your actions align with your words or move in a different direction. And this observation shapes perception. People may listen to what you say, but they believe what you do. This belief is not formed in a single moment. It develops gradually, through repeated experiences. Each action adds to a larger picture, a picture that defines how others understand you. And once that picture is formed, it becomes difficult to change without consistent effort. This is why alignment matters so much. When your words and actions match, there is clarity. There is no confusion about your intentions because they are supported by visible behavior. But when they do not match, even the most sincere words can be questioned. Not because they are false, but because they are not reinforced. There is also an emotional dimension to this. Words can create expectation. When you say something meaningful, it sets a standard. It creates an image of what someone can anticipate from you. If your actions meet that expectation, the connection becomes stronger. If they fall short, the difference between expectation and reality becomes noticeable. And that difference can have a lasting impact. It can lead to disappointment, not because the words were empty, but because they were not sustained. Over time, repeated inconsistencies can reduce the value of even genuine expressions. People begin to rely less on what is said and more on what is consistently demonstrated. This shift happens naturally. It is not something people consciously decide. It is a response to experience. When actions consistently reflect words, trust grows. When they do not, trust begins to weaken, even if the words remain positive and well-intentioned. This is why actions are often remembered more clearly than words. You may forget exactly what someone said, but you remember how they behaved. You remember whether they showed up, whether they followed through, whether they were present when it mattered. These memories are tied to experience, not just language, and that makes them more lasting. Actions also communicate without requiring interpretation. Words can be misunderstood. They can be interpreted in different ways depending on tone, context, or perspective. But actions are more direct. They show rather than tell. They provide evidence that does not rely on explanation. This clarity makes them powerful. It removes ambiguity. It creates a direct connection between intention and outcome, and it allows others to understand your priorities without needing constant reassurance. There is also a discipline involved in letting actions lead. It requires patience, because results are not always immediate. It requires consistency, because a single action is not enough. And it requires awareness, because your behavior is constantly communicating something, whether you intend it to or not. This awareness changes how you approach interaction. Instead of focusing only on what to say, you begin to consider what to do. You begin to recognize that every action contributes to a larger message, a message that defines how you are perceived and how you connect with others. And this applies in every area of life. In relationships, actions create connection. In work, actions create credibility. In personal growth, actions create progress. Words can initiate these things, but they cannot sustain them on their own. Sustainability comes from behavior. It comes from the ability to repeat meaningful actions over time, even when it is not convenient, even when it requires effort, even when there is no immediate recognition. This repetition transforms intention into reality, because in the end, what shapes outcomes is not what is said once, but what is done repeatedly. And over time, these repeated actions form a pattern that defines trust, a pattern that defines reliability, a pattern that communicates far more than words ever could. Because while words may introduce an idea, it is action that gives that idea substance. It is action that turns expression into experience. It is action that transforms intention into something real and observable. And when actions consistently reflect what is said, they do more than support words. They give them depth.